your live video to the World Unity Week?
We are.
Oh yeah, if you can do that, that's fantastic. So I'm at Op Partners is the Facebook it's going to go to. In fact, I can
It's now live.
Partners. Okay, good.
Streaming live.
Fantastic. Here we are. Wonderful. We're being recorded, so we're good to go. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So happy to have you with us. This is incredible. We are in day 3 in the temple here. This is World Unity Week 2021, and this is an online global event of heart-centered change makers and activists and leaders who are all coming together to address the issues that we're collectively dealing with. And so it's been incredible so far. We are specifically in the Temple of the Rising Feminine, and I am one of the co-stewards. My co-host here, Pleasance, is one of the other stewards. There are 7 sisters of us who have come together to create this space, the sacred space. And we are on day 3. We have released on day 1. We have remembered on day 2, and today we're rising. And then tomorrow we reunite. So it's powerful, powerful. If you haven't had a chance, you can go back and see the recordings of what's happened so far, but we're thrilled to have you here today. I am Elisabeth Williams. I am the founder of Op Partners, which is a social impact advisory firm. And I'm going to tell you first just a bit about how I got here to this conversation. Then I'm going to turn it over to Pleasance, who's going to introduce herself and how she got here. And then we're going to start to weave what this conversation is. And we absolutely hope that you'll join us in this. So I would say a couple of months ago, I was in a Zoom room like this with a group of female social entrepreneurs from around the world. And we had come together for a discussion that I thought was actually going to be a discussion around social enterprises. The woman who was leading the conversation asked the question, do you call yourself a feminist? And most of the women in the room answered that they did. And I, wanting to be honest and authentic, said, I don't. Now, you have to understand that my business is all about empowering women. So that doesn't make clear sense without an explanation, but it really made me question why I didn't. And what was more interesting to me was that when I said that, this woman was clearly troubled by that. And in fact, so much so that a wall went up. I could sense that she no longer wanted to have an interaction with me, despite the fact that we had come together for a similar purpose. So when I left that meeting, it really made me kind of question, what is feminism? Why don't I call myself a feminist? And more than that, why are we allowing labels to divide us as women? Whether it's the label of feminist or not, whether it's our color, our race, our culture, our religion, our politics, our identity, our gender identity, we're allowing that to divide us. And my firm belief is the only way we will rise is if we rise together by eliminating all those things that are dividing us as women. And so I wanted to pursue the conversation around feminism. And that's why I presented this topic for this week, and Pleasance hopped on board. And now I'm going to turn it over to her and let her explain why she's here. And then we're going to dive deeper into feminism.
Yes, thank you, Liz. Yes, so along with Liz, the 2 of us are part of the 7 sisters. And I put it in chat, but for all of you watching this on video, we spell sisters. We go capital S-I, then capital S stars, sisters. Because of the Pleiades, of course, the 7 sisters. So that's kind of a connection we have as well. Yes, so I'm delighted to be here because when Liz raised this topic, we had a bit of a discussion about it. And the thing is, I am a feminist. I've been a feminist for a long time. I've called myself a feminist for decades. But what I realized through our discussion is that how I feel about myself as a feminist now is a bit different to how I used to feel about myself as a feminist back then. So we then realized that was the opportunity for us to have a very rich dialogue and to find out the commonalities between us and also look at what's going to emerge in this conversation. So this feels like an amazing opportunity to come onto the canvas of what is feminism, what does it mean for now, and to explore some ideas around that. So that's what we'll be doing in this session with all of you.
Okay, wonderful, exciting. So what I did to kind of prepare for this was the first thing I did was I said, all right, I want to go to even look at the definition of feminism. And so I just want to read a couple of things that came up because I think it is really important. So the first was feminism is the belief in social, economic, and political equality of the sexes. Although largely originating in the West, feminism is manifested worldwide and is represented by various institutions committed to activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. So I read that and I said, boom, that's all me. I'm all about that. Next, feminism is about all genders having equal rights and opportunities. It's about respecting diverse women's experiences, identities, knowledge, and strengths, and striving to empower all women to realize full rights. Boom, love it. Feminism is about working against the systems built to keep certain groups of people oppressed and striving towards equality for everyone. It means fighting for intersectionality and acknowledging how race, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status affects feminism. So again, I'm on board with all of that. And so of course I read all of those and said, yes, I absolutely agree with these things. So why don't I want to call myself a feminist? And I dug a little bit deeper and I said, because where I come from, I mean, whether it's being in Chicago or in the United States or in the family that I grew up in or whatever it is, my view of feminism was tainted by a vision of women who call themselves feminists as being really angry and bringing that angry energy out into the world. And I don't believe that that is productive. And I didn't want to be associated with that. I could literally remember a meeting that I was in. It was philanthropists in the city. And there was a panel of 3 women who were the heads of nonprofit organizations that were addressing issues for women. And the whole meeting was just tainted with anger. And I left that day thinking, I don't want any part of this, even though their missions are really, really good. I didn't want to be part of that energy. So that was, when I dove into that, I said, well, I wonder is feminism still that way? Or, and if so, is it time for us to explore, because we know feminism is important, we know that what's behind it is important. Is it time for us to explore how we're presenting ourselves as feminists, or what feminism really means? And so that's where Pleasance and I came together and started saying, well, what does it mean? And so we kind of came up with this list that we're going to just tap into here. We kind of set it up as the old feminism and the new feminism, and that it's not completely accurate that way, but that was just helped us to kind of put some structure around this. So we started out and I said, okay, so if old feminism is about righteous anger, I mean, there's no doubt that we have things to be angry for, and so it's righteous anger. Could we switch to the new feminism as a passion for change? Pleasance, you could jump in anytime.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, I'm really happy to jump in, because what I want to say, just declaring about myself, I was one of those angry women. I was extremely angry, and I was very angry at patriarchy. I was very angry at the male dominance I saw around me. And as it happened, I had been born into a particular religion where women were seen to be subordinate to men, and where women, at that time in that religion, women were not allowed to speak in church. But can I give you an example, a counter-example in that? Because at the same time, on my mother's side, there were all these really strong women, like my mum, her sisters, she was one of 4 sisters, and my grandmother, a phenomenal force for good and love, a Norwegian, New Zealander. And the thing is, if women weren't allowed to speak in church, she reckoned there had to be a way around this. So one of the family stories is that when my grandmother was moved by the Spirit to think the next hymn should be this, she would elbow my grandfather and say, hymn number 71, and up he'd leap, hymn number 71. So I grew up with, quite a contrast there. And that's where it was so interesting just to be aware of those differences between what I was being told and what I actually saw, which actually planted the seeds for me later in my life. So in terms of my being angry, in my 20s, what I was very conscious of through to my early 30s was the way society was set up. And just to take you back to those times, I remember there was one protest I was part of in our capital city, Wellington, New Zealand, a whole group of us. We were outside a doctor's house protesting because he had been let off the hook about raping and murdering his wife, not off the hook for the murder, but he was let off the hook for rape because rape was still deemed to be acceptable in marriage. So that was one of the reasons why I was so angry, along with many, many others. So there's the righteous anger at those times. But what many of us also did with this is we funneled it into action. So my experience of the feminism from then was this incredible collection of women, and it was global. It was particularly in the Western world, but also aware of what was going on for women in other countries like Africa. And what we did is we gathered, we created action, we brought attention to inequalities like legislation that needed to be changed, like that one I've just talked about. And I just had such an incredible buzz being part of that group of women. And what I did at the time too was I felt burdened, if you like, about the need to kind of raise my awareness and the awareness of others around what is it like to be a woman in these times. So this is back in the 80s and 90s. So I set up a specialist bookshop in Wellington called The Woman's Place. And that was part of a number of bookshops across the country and in fact all around the Western world, where we focused on the research around us, where we wrote our poetry, we told our stories, and often those bookshops were a gathering place. So these are some of the experiences I've shared with Liz about my experience as a feminist in those times leading up to the turn of the century.
Yeah, and I think what's so important is, first of all, to say, you know, that anger was important to be the impetus for you to become involved or for, you know,
Yes.
for change to happen. And so I think the question is it healthy for us, though, as women to hang on to that anger, right? I mean, we really need, I think, to be able to heal that anger for ourselves, but then use that anger as the impetus for change, that passion for change. So it's a balance,
Yes.
but it's important. Well, let's go on then. So the next one was old feminism was desiring to be equals. And we said that the new feminism is desiring to be authentic, embracing fully our divine feminine and masculine. And so that's this new approach, right? It's not about we want to be like men. We want to balance the beauty of our feminine and masculine, right? And be authentically who we are. How do you resonate with that, Pleasant?
Yes. Well, if I want to just be a bit out there, one of the other things I did share with Liz is we had badges and T-shirts at that time that I was selling through our the Woman's Place bookshop, and they said things like, "Women who seek to be equal to men lack ambition." So it's like we were being very cheeky and heaps of humour around that, but I think it's something too. This next point about proving we can do anything a man can do, that was also a driver for a lot of us. And what also happened at that point, this is the latter part of last century, was all these classes around self-defense, about women learning to be assertive and moving out of the traditional passive role. And again, that's where we productively channeled our anger into those kinds of activities. And then I remember, because I'm lesbian, and I remember some of the abuse I would get just walking down the street, holding my girlfriend's hand. And at that time, I was pretty aggressive about that. So if someone was aggressive to me verbally, I would be aggressive back. But again, it felt like we were still just paving the way and establishing the space that it was actually okay to love women, that it was actually really important to have our place to come together, where we could come together and just work out more around our shared experiences and what it was that needed to be changed out there. But here's one of the points, Liz, that you and I have talked about previously. What I think I'd overlooked at that stage too, though, was how much healing I needed to do inside. So a lot of my anger, turning it into action, very productive, making a big difference. I was committed to that. I helped make a big difference along with others, but still I kept the focus outside, you know? So I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah. Yeah. So we said the old feminism, you know, was proving we can do anything a man can do, but the new feminism is, and I love this, just no need to prove anything to anyone, right? I mean, isn't that what we want? We just want to be authentically ourselves without having to prove ourselves. So I love that.
Yes.
Then we went to wanting a seat at the table, and we said, you know, it's not so much just wanting a seat at the table. We think we should enlarge the table and change the settings. Right. I love that. And I think Pleasance, you had added changing the settings. Do you want to expand
Yes,
on that?
I had, yeah. And in fact, I do remember a riveting speech made by one of our iconic figures here in New Zealand at a big women's conference, and a big women's convention, where she said, we don't want another piece of the pie. I'm just going to be dramatic. We want the whole damn bakery. You know, it's like.
Yeah, right. That's why we said, you know, let's just enlarge the table. Like, couldn't there just, you know, be room for more? Like, let's just think beyond. So really we're trying, you know, let's think outside the box.
Yes.
The next one we said was making it to the C-suite. And apparently Pleasant wasn't familiar with that term. So the C-suite is the corporate suite, at least here in the US, that's how we refer to it. And, you know, it's been interesting. Many women have now made it to the C-suite. And then there's the question of, is that really where you want to be? You know, and is that really what we should be aspiring to? And so we said, well, maybe it's not so much making it to the C-suite as it is spending time outside connected to Mother Nature. So this is just, again, a whole different approach to feminism, the divine feminism. And so we thought that was just a beautiful thought. So again, not to say that anything in the old feminism is wrong. We're just trying to think bigger, right? Think differently. So,
and I've got my own example from my own lived experience, because the area I ended up working in government departments in New Zealand was equal opportunities, where they actually wanted feminists like me, because the government departments were saying, oh, we feel a bit guilty. Why aren't women, they blame the women first. Why aren't women going for the positions? And then why aren't they getting promotions and so on? And so women like me, and a whole bunch of us actually in Wellington in particular, were brought into government departments as equal opportunity managers. And we were charged with changing the culture from within. Now, I have to say, that was one of the toughest assignments I've ever had in my entire work history. And I've also been a senior manager. Not as hard as changing something from within, but what we had, and again, this is the good thing about those times, what we had was such a sense of being bonded around this. And some of the stuff we had to deal with was really hard. So one of the roles I was given when I was an equal opportunities manager was I was charged with going to reduce sexual harassment in prisons, in the New Zealand prison system. Now, that was a huge assignment. And when I say sexual harassment, in this case, I'm talking about the male prison officers actually raping the female prison officers.
Oh, wow.
So it was massive. And because I've had such a mission around reducing violence against women and children, it was so on purpose. So with a team, we put in procedures. We had compulsory training for every prison in the country. And when something did happen, because of course there were attempts to still keep on having that kind of behaviour, we had a very rigorous process we put in place. So that's how I was able to use feminism at that time to fuel my anger into action and make a difference and make the workplace safer.
Yeah.
But there's something I want to jump to too at this point, Liz, because at the same time as I was doing that work, I became increasingly aware that if I just let anger run me, I was going to completely burn out.
Yes.
I mean, there were so many things to be enraged about. We called a big hui of women probation officers. We called a big hui, a big gathering, national gathering of the women prison officers working in the male prisons. The facilitator said, well, we'll take half an hour to introduce ourselves. It took lunchtime because this was the first time these women working in these tough environments had the chance to hear each other's stories.
Yeah.
So again, there was that pouring out of grief and what it's like, and real authenticity and a sense of such bonding. But back to me, what I became conscious of was, if my anger continued to rule or run my activities, I was going to burn out. So at this point, and this is the turning point for me, I realized I needed to become a meditator, and I took myself off to a 10-day silent retreat. I did it 3 times just to really internalize that aspect. And there it is, bringing out the need for self-care for us as well, for all change agents in the world, and the need to keep the focus on the inside as well as on the outside.
Well, let's keep going because we're going to get to that. I know we've addressed that too, so that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that story, Pleasance. So let's see. We had equal pay for equal work, which again, nobody can argue that that's not right. But we said it goes beyond that. We want to do what brings us joy and fulfillment, and be recognized for that. Really, that's what we want, to feel more fulfilled, to be more enriched. We had for the old feminism being loud and confrontational, and kind of going to what you're talking about with meditation. We changed that to being still and yet voicing our truth. Right. So that strength coming from within, from the stillness within, right? Not the anger, but from that stillness within.
Yes. And in fact, what I found when I began that meditation practice, and when I actually began developing really strong spiritual practices while still doing this change-making work, what I found was there was something about my presence, even going into, and these were hostile situations, going into a management meeting where every person in the room is male, because the other 2 women managers didn't want to go. And I literally had a choice at that point. I walked in and thought, oh my goodness, what do I do? And then there was someone I knew who was like second to back row, and he waved over and thought I could go and sit with him. And I thought, no, because what I felt was, I felt the responsibility of 3,500 women who were in that government department. I felt them on my shoulders. So thinking of that, I took a deep breath. I came back into a very calm space within, and that was the meditative practice coming through. And I walked firmly and with great purpose right up to the front row. And then every time a question occurred to me, with the 3,500 women on my shoulders, I would go, oh yes, I have a question. Can I ask that? Can I clarify something there? So they heard my voice, but I wasn't doing it from me or for me. I was doing it for all those women in that way.
That's magnificent. Yes, I love that you're sharing these real life stories of this transformation, transformation. And I do want to get to you explaining even more what that means for you today. But let's keep going with this list. We had the old feminism was seeking knowledge. The new is tapping into our intuition, which we so know as women, that is our gift. We have that intuition that's deep within. It is wise, and that's where we want to go to look for those answers and those solutions that we so desperately need now. And then this is where we started, seeking to change the world. In other words, the world out there, and instead being that change we want to see in the world. And Pleasance is perfectly showing us how that happens when we focus on the inner work first. Doesn't mean we ignore the outer work, but we focus on that inner work first, getting to that place of centered peace within, so that we can go out into the world in a more positive energy. We talked about acting locally, which is very important, but we wanted to expand that to being engaged in planetary transformation, which is what we're all about this week in World Unity Week. And what we realized is we are all connected. And so, what we do for each other, it just expands, it just blossoms. So we want to be thinking bigger. How can we co-create a new world together? Trying to fit into a man's world, which, we know, I was in the corporate world in the 80s. That's what we were doing. You could do it, but you had to fit into that man's world, which is why I chose to leave the corporate world. I didn't want to fit in. Instead, we don't want to fit in. We want to stand fully in our uniqueness and the power of our presence. Mm-hmm. So we love that. We love that. And then we got into things like the old feminism was the ability to choose what's right for our body, and that's important. We wanted to go deeper and say, yes, it's actually also recognizing that our body is the temple of spirit, the temple of our divinity. And that makes it so much richer and so much deeper.
Yeah. And if I can just speak to that too, I do want to honor the impact and the effect of what we're calling the old feminism, because of course, without that having happened, women would still not feel they have the right to claim their bodies. And we know that that's the case still in many countries around the world. We know that's the case in many domestic, intimate relationships. We know that is still the case. So it's like, it's so important to actually come back to our right to have responsibility for our bodies. And then that goes to reproductive rights and different views around abortion and so on. But the key thing here is coming back to the sacredness of the female and what we embody on the planet at this time, because we are the bringers of life. We carry that generative force within us, and we're tuned into the cycles of the moon and the seasons of nature. And there's the special quality that women hold. And I see that as part of accepting all of that, being so in tune with nature. And I see that as part of the new feminism as well.
Without a doubt. And it is so important to point that out, that we are not viewed as sacred yet. We need to return to that. That is so important. If we are going to end violence against women and girls and children, we have to return to the sacredness. You are absolutely right. And so if we can begin to recognize ourselves, our body as the temple, as sacred, then perhaps we can transform the world's view, men's view of women's bodies.
Yes.
But that is so key, I believe.
It's really key. And I guess it's a message out to all women and girls watching this video too. You were born into the female body. You know, we are the female of the human species. We actually hold the key to the changes that are happening, that need to happen now. So for each of us, all of us, to come back to honoring our bodies, honoring how special it is to be female in these times, and to just keep on reinforcing and respecting that with each other as well.
Absolutely. Let's go on. We had the old feminism holding back tears, and we said in the new feminism we are deeply in touch with our emotions. Deeply in touch. And again, this goes back to the anger. We're deeply in touch with our emotions so that we can feel them and release them and be able to live in our vibrant fullness. But if we bury them, they end up coming out, and that's when they come out in illness.
Yes.
Or in crisis.
Yes, and there's probably something I'd like to share here again about my own evolutionary journey through the feminist I was and the feminist I now am, which is that one of the very pivotal moments for me was as I got in touch with the way men dominated the world, the way men continued to want to and often did dominate women. I became very angry. And I remember I was in the States at the time, I went to a women's workshop on getting in touch with your anger. We tore newspapers up. We stamped around the room. There was loud music playing for us to get in touch with the anger. And it was incredible. And what it did, it turned the switch from fear into anger. And then there was one more switch that needed to turn, which turned quite rapidly for me, which was into action. But I just want to address the issue around fear, because it's a fundamental thing still that needs to be lifted. The fear all women have about being treated violently by men. So at one point as well, in the 90s, I went on a vision quest by myself to the mountains. It came after a course with Jean Houston, the phenomenal visionary, who was in New Zealand at the time. And she told me to go on a vision quest and find a new vision, because the current vision I had was outdated. So I went on the vision quest. But part of the vision quest was being brave enough to go up into the mountains by myself, not an experienced tramper, but more to the point, doing it alone, being completely self-sufficient for 2 weeks. That's what I did. And the peak part, where I've been instructed by my spiritual teacher to be in a 24-hour spiritual vision, in that peak part where I'd found what I thought was a safe place, it turned out there was a man in the camping ground below me, and he heard the rustling of someone. And I heard steps coming up to that tent, and I knew I was now facing a huge fear. I remember I clutched amethysts, crystals, none of that worked. And then I thought, I've got to do something else. It's got to come from me. And I sat cross-legged in that tent. I made it a temple, and I began to breathe like a mountain. And I sent that vibration out, and he went away. But that was my test. And it was a deep spiritual one, and it was a very real physical one as well. So when I came out of that vision quest, I felt so much stronger. And I knew that something in me had fundamentally changed, because I now had experienced holding my own in a very challenging, terrifying situation, and finding the spiritual power coming through to keep me safe.
That is incredible. It's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. And it just makes me go back to, again, that strength that you got from going within. I mean, that's where that's coming from, right? Being so centered, so solid in that.
Yes.
That's magnificent. Incredible story. And so here, you know, we get to the end of our list here, and that's where we kind of focused on. We went from fixing things out there in the old feminism to healing from within. And so that's where we keep coming back to that, don't we? We keep coming back to that. It's that healing from within. It's that strength from within.
Yes.
We had a couple of others, family and children coming second. And I know, Pleasance, you shared with us that many women in the feminist movement had to give up the children or the family, that type of thing. It had to come second. I certainly saw it in the corporate world. And we wanted to just acknowledge that we felt it was very important for women to honor motherhood, all to honor motherhood. As you said, Pleasance, we are the nurturers, we are the childbearers, we create. And Mother Earth, that connection to Mother Earth as well.
Yes, I fully agree. And I think there we'd also talked about the paramount need for self-care.
Yeah.
And as I've shared, that's what I realized early on. I did not want to burn out, because the work I was doing, I was so passionate about. And self-care continues, you know, like how to get enough sleep and all of that. Here we are, World Unity Week, and all of that. But nevertheless, it's like, And I've just seen something beautiful come up in the chat. Many African stories where this woman says where she had to be strong, and she's glad that she's remembered that. So thank you for sharing that in the chat.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, our last one was being an activist and putting ourselves last. And you know, it is true. I mean, and particularly if you look out now at the world and you think there's so much that needs to be done, I have to get out there and do this. And we do need to step up into leadership. But self-care and soul care, what we're referring to today, are so critical. Because as you said, Pleasance, social impact does not happen quickly. It takes a long time and a lot of effort. And we need you in there for the long haul. So in order to do that, you need to pace yourself. And that self-care and soul care are not only going to impact your ability to come out with more positive energy, but it's going to help you to stay in the game for the long run. And that's what we want. So that's our list. That's our old feminism to new feminism. And it's not meant in any way to throw out the old feminism. It's instead to add on to it, right? It's a supplement, it's an enrichment. It's and so that was our hope.
So Can I ask you a question then, Liz? I mean, given the discussion we're now having and also what we've had prior to this, how do you feel yourself about saying that you could be a feminist, or how does that feel to you now?
I think it feels fine, but I kept saying if somebody were to ask me, I would want to explain. I think I would want to say, but I'm more than that. I am a divine feminist. I mean, to me, that's just really important. And it comes back to this bringing back the sacred into everything. So a program that I have called the 7 Pillars of Women's Repowerment. There are 7 pillars, but the first and the 7th to me are the most important. The first is reconnecting to Mother Earth. Yes. And the 7th is restoring the sacred. I truly believe that without those 2 things, all of the things that we're doing around health and education and freedom from violence and those things, none will be enough if we don't reconnect to Mother Earth and restore the sacred. Yes. And so I would, if someone were to ask that question again, I would say yes, but I would love to give more of an explanation.
Yes.
Given that opportunity.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just been so wonderful to be able to explore this. However, I going back to the whole idea also that we wanted to present, which was, but do we even need these labels, right? Is it helping us? Is it moving us forward to have these labels? And so that's just kind of the deeper part of the conversation. So I don't know. I feel very committed, and particularly after what we've been going through in our room, in this space, this temple of the sacred and the rising feminine, that we have to come together as women. There are so many issues to be addressed, and we were, yesterday we had powerful work with Indigenous women, and
beautiful.
So much happening, but it's not just the Indigenous. I mean, we know our African American and Black sisters, our Asian, all there are issues in all those communities. But does it help us to stay separate, or can we come together as women? And that's what I'd love to see happen. And that's what I think we'll see as we go forward. Could we create circles of women from all walks of life to realize, as you said, sharing our stories and how similar they are.
Yes.
We really do want the same things. And so that's why I'd love to get away from the label of feminism and instead just focus on who are we to become as the divine feminine rising.
Okay.
And so
yes. So for me, I guess I'm still happy to be called a feminist, but a bit like you, Liz, I would also want to go and redefine it about how I see it now in terms of my own evolutionary journey. And the other point I want to make is that this isn't just a Western thing. So in 2010, I was in the Middle East. I had a contract at the Bahrain Polytechnic, management coach. International Day of Women, the UN International Day of Eliminating Violence Against Women came up during the time that I was there. I'd love to share what some of the young women did at that Polytechnic. They decided they wanted to bring to their fellow students and lecturers attention to this issue about violence against women. So for days and weeks before the actual day, when there was a big gathering that they were running, they went in and out of the classrooms. Now, they actually put makeup on. They put makeup on to show a black eye. They went in and out of the classrooms and said, violence against women and girls is unacceptable. We're here to invite you. This is women with veils, black-eyed, the makeup. We are here to invite you to come to a discussion about this. So we all went. Now, I was moved to tears because there were about half a dozen young Muslim women in the Middle East standing and telling their fellow students and the lecturers, most of us very supportive, the lecturers at the back, why this wasn't acceptable. And what they said is, this isn't just a Western issue, this is a global one. And it just hit home so strongly. This is the paradigm we need to change. And part of World Unity Week is about looking inside and making those changes within ourselves. But one of my favourite poets, Audre Lorde, black lesbian poet from the States, years ago said, her vision for the world is to have a world where there is no longer any domination. And I think that's what it's about, to eliminate domination of a gender over another gender, or race over another race,
Yep.
and whatever it might be, and also to look within ourselves to come into more internal harmony with ourselves, and then send the peace out from that place inside.
Absolutely. 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 So beautiful. And I so thrilled to see Juana is here with us, and she's been with us this week in so many ways. And Rami, I see you on camera as well. I would just like to invite, if anyone in the circle here would like to share based on what we've been talking about, we would love to hear your voices. So please let us know. Raise your hand. Yeah, Rami, I see. Please.
Yeah. Hi and good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay, but I think I need my earphones. It's much easier. So just give me a second.
Okay.
Okay.
So what is it you'd like to say or ask?
I just listen to you, and I very much get inspired, because I think some stories or whatever the stories were women, or where I had been powerful, and so they just can get easy. I mean, I just forget easily about it, and just remember by. Because I think I have to do something like to expose myself to nature for a certain time, to regain the trust in myself, and But I mean, when I think I was on the camel in East Africa, and there were so many things, but for me, it's just, it gives me some energy, but it's not all. I think I can reconnect with what happened in the past, but now I have to do something in the present and in the future, because the other things it's already happened, and it's perhaps nice to know that I once could do it, so I'm still able to do something more again, but not too much to hold on what's happened, more what will be and what it's possible. Yes.
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 Beautifully said. Beautifully said. That's it. You know, hanging on to the past doesn't serve us. We can certainly look there, you know, to explore it and to question, and what can we change, but to hang on to it doesn't serve us.
Yeah.
It's being in the present, be here now, right? Being at peace in the present, but then visioning the future, a better future for all, and then we take our action.
Just feel like taking my bike and going for the next hundreds of kilometers.
Do it. Yes, get out in nature. Yes, you will reconnect.
Yes. Okay, but it's a nice talk, but I think for me it's now midnight. I think sometimes it's time to go to sleep. But wishing you a great time, and I enjoy to discover many of these parts.
Stay with us 10 minutes, Rami. We're almost done, and I want you to hear our vision statement before you get up. 10 minutes, and then you can go.
10 minutes, it's fine. Okay. Have a good evening. Have a good time. Okay.
Juana, would you like to say anything, darling, before we give our vision statement?
Just I've come in a little late into it, but that's fine. I was a victim of a number of things, but domestic violence. Just often when you're faced with anything that challenges me, I'll step back into that victim mode. Oh. So for me to come forward on this platform, as I have done so and stepped into my authentic self, is testimony that I've come a long way, because I would shy from it, move away from it, and just continue. But I had to do a lot of internal work, and I'm so grateful even for the lesson, because without that, I wouldn't have the strength within me that I have to have even stood it. So and to stand here now.
Yes.
So
Thank you,
yes,
everyone.
I'm a divine feminist.
You are. Yes, we all are. We all are. Thank you for sharing that so much. And thank you, Pleasance as well. I think what's beautiful in that is the recognition of the beauty in the darkness, the light in the darkness. I mean, the things that have happened to us that challenge us greatly and can be incredibly painful, but they really are the light that leads us forward. It is what gives us our strength, and it is what gives us our compassion and ability to empathize with other women and lift them up. So when we can look back at those things and from a place where we can see the beauty in that, when we call it our sacred wounds, wow, everything changes, doesn't it? Everything changes. And you just, I just looking at you, Juana, and I've been so privileged to be with you this week. All I see is feminine strength. All I see is the divine feminine. Just glowing. So beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, we are almost out of time. We've got a plenary starting in 5 minutes, but Pleasance, I hope you'll share with us. So as part of this, we did our list, and then Pleasance had put together some thoughts about, we said from fiery feminist, that's what she called herself, to evolutionary woman. And that's what we all write, the divine feminist and the evolutionary woman. And we said, isn't there something better than equality with men? And so that's what we're going for, is something better. And so would you read that for us, Pleasance?
Yes, certainly. Yes, certainly. So this is our vision statement for our now future, and living it as if it's now too. So to be clear-sighted about what's happened in the past, to acknowledge that, our suffering and our wounding, but seen that as sacred wounds, as the healing that needs to happen to actually then move forward. And coming back to a fundamental principle of love, where it all begins. And this is what bridges the divide. And love is what takes us forward from anger and past pain into being willing to make the changes within, to honour the women within, the female of the species, and call our separate parts home. And alongside that, being committed to unity amongst women, affinity with all women, recognising we have far more in common than our diversity, and how that then moves into a desire to gather with women, no longer doing it again. And so the final part of this was a few qualities: courage to face our reality and to step into something new, a willingness to be open to that, and that includes to be vulnerable with each other. And we've been that within the Seven Sisters. We have been in that space. And to listen deeply to what's emerging now. What is it the evolutionary impulse is wanting to draw out from women around the world? And here it is. Because we are generative, because we have the life-giving force within our own within our wombs, because we carry that, we are the ones that are needed to step forward, along with Indigenous grandmothers. And the Indigenous grandmothers' wisdom just came out so strongly, because they hold that ancient connection with Mother Nature and with the Divine Mother. So working with them, working with all women, recognising the generative, creative abilities we carry, and remembering the legacy we hold in these pivotal times. Because it's possible that in a few thousand years in the future, women will be looking back to these times and they'll be saying, wasn't it great? That's when women realised what they needed to do on the planet. And there it is, the new blueprint for women, setting the way for the new blueprint for humanity. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, sister. And I'm just going to grab these comments. Shen said that piece that resonated with me most is the shift to balancing between our internal feminine and masculine. Indeed. Thank you, Shen. And then Rami said, great. And always dance when power seems to move away. Always dance. I love that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank
sisters.
you.
Thank you for being with us.
And I think we were doing this as a PDF as well, weren't we?
We will. What we'll do is I'll take this, I've got it as a PDF, and I'll pop it into, so in the Temple of the Rising Feminine with this card for this presentation, we'll attach it there. So you can grab both our old feminism, new feminism list, and then this visionary statement. So you can have that as well. So thank you so much for being with us. So much more to come. Please tap into the Temple as well as the other World Unity Week events, and we're just so happy you're with us, and so look forward to being with you again.
And go well, be strong, and acknowledge the divine female, the divine feminine within you, and love yourself. And then that love is what will go out into the world. So thank you. Thank you for your presence here, and to all of those watching us later. Thank you.
Much love.